In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, we are going to touch on some under the radar NBA prospects who are off to pretty good starts in the 2024-25 season. And who better to bring on than Ersin Demir, who has made a name for himself identifying some of the top underrated NBA prospects. So stay tuned to hear our thoughts on some sleepers that you may hear about as the season goes on. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, along with my co-host for today, Ersin Demir. And I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I also want to let you know about the new Locked On newsletter. So your favorite Locked On podcast has a newsletter, and it will be delivered right to your inbox. So check it out at LockedOnDaily.com. And of course, if you are not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please subscribe, like, share, comment, click the bell so you can be notified every time we drop an episode, because we are your source, at least the NBA Big Board crew. We are your source for daily NBA draft podcasts, because we come at you at least 5 days a week. And I am so glad that college basketball season has started. It's still in the early stages of the season, so you got guys playing against cupcake schools, but starting within the next few days, you're going to start to see some matchups against some Power 5. I don't even know. Power 5 is it P4 now? I guess it's P4 in football. Who knows with all this conference realignment? But you're starting to see some really good matchups. And in this episode, we're going to cover prospects not only playing college basketball, but internationally. First of all, Ersin, it's been a minute. It's been a little while since we did a pod.
Yeah, man.
And I've seen your growth, and I've seen how you've developed a good following. So big shout out to you for that. But what are your overall thoughts on this group of under the radar prospects that could shake up draft boards as the season goes on?
Hey, I like it a lot, man. I think the way that the NBA is shifting towards older players again, with the mix of the young players having less pressure to perform immediately so they can invest in their development, this class is a lot of fun, man, because they have great prospects in both areas. Even it's in the United States or in Europe. Yeah, man. I feel like this year's talent group is very good to, locate a lot of good talent.
Do you think the NBA is really shifting towards older players? I mean, you look at Dawson Connect fell to 17. AJ Mitchell, who's playing well, was a second-round pick. Jalen Wells was a second-round pick. And then you have guys that went, in the lottery that just don't look like they are close to being ready. So do you think the NBA is really going to shift towards older players?
Yeah, I think so, man. Because if you look at, for example, you name Mogbo, you name Wells, second-round picks. They spent 3 years in college. I think that's going to be the new norm, and teams are going to find much more value, with those late first round, second round picks. I mean, look at the rookie leaderboard today. Connect, Mogbo, Wells, they picked very late, and they have some years of experience in college, growing from Division II, junior college basketball, mid majors to the high majors. So I think that's an example of much more to come in the next few years, because yeah, man, let's face it, the NBA has a lot of talent, and they can develop all these top 10 picks accordingly. So they need ready guys as well.
Yeah, I did speak with a scout recently, and he said that he felt outside of the lottery, you're going to see some older players. All right, let's start off with Elijah Mahi. You're the first person that put me on to him, and he's a player that when I watched his film, he immediately popped. Like, for me, watching film is like listening to a song, right? So I can tell in the first 5 seconds whether or not I'm going to like a player or not. And there are times where I just have to really watch a player, even though he doesn't pop immediately. Mahi popped immediately, 6'7", 220 from Santa Clara. Canadian guy, has an interesting journey. He was playing JUCO last year, had some big performances. Why what are your thoughts on him, and why are you so high on Mahi? And I'll share my opinion why I'm so high on him.
I had the same thing, man, because I heard about him in the summer from the JUCO race who went to Santa Clara, which was 20 miles out of the junior college that he was playing at. And then they had that kind of tournament at South Dakota State, I think. I saw some of that film, and just like you, 5 minutes it only took me. I was sold. I wanted to know more about this guy, and what I see in him is I like the role that he's playing at Santa Clara. He's not the star, so he's not going to be the same in the NBA. But I like what he's going to bring to the table in terms of his role. I think his development path to the league will lead to him playing some G League minutes because of the lack of high major experience. You can see some mistakes of playing at the lower level, sense of rotation on defense, etc., etc. But the things that he does very well, he's so explosive, man. I think if he corrects his handle a little bit more, he can be a very good scorer at the NBA level, 10 to 15 points a game. If I look at the team like Oklahoma City Thunder, who is looking to play 4 out, 5 out, he's the type of guy that you can put at the 3, put at the 4, and maybe play as a smaller 5 to make it really happen. Not because of the lack of size, but the lack of his very good strength. I think his combination of core strength, good hips, and physical strength in his frame gives him a big advantage, man, because he does everything with craft and with finesse. And has a very good eye to how to put his shoulder into someone's chest and create advantages that way as a scorer. He has good touch around the rim. And as a 3-point shooter, he is taking the right 3-point shot. I know that sounds cliche, but if you look at the numbers feel sustainable because he has a very consistent form, and he's taking the same amount of threes, the same types of threes. He doesn't really make it happen off the dribble because that's not really his role. But if he's open, he's going to make good decisions, whether to attack, the closeout, or to shoot. I think he is that ultimate low usage wing, which you can use in multiple roles. For example, as a 3, 4, or if you want to put some extra shooting on the lineup as a smaller 5, because of his man strength. I think despite him being a junior, he feels like he's 1-2 years older than he actually is.
Yeah, as far as the 3-point shooting, low volume of attempts. He had a game yesterday, but before yesterday, he was 6 of 9, and he shot 47% from 3 at the JUCO ranks last year. He's a reluctant shooter. He'll pass up an open shot because he wants to get to the cup, and that's exactly where he does most of his damage. But I like him. I was talking to someone yesterday about him. It's crazy because I wrote an article on him on Tuesday on NBABigBoard.com. Shameless plug. Check it out, NBABigBoard.com. Wrote an article about him, and then I went to a Mavericks game later on that night, and somebody had mentioned, like, oh, yeah, I saw the article, and I actually had a couple people tell me about him, just based off reading the article. And then I actually had a guy that he was recruiting a teammate of his a couple years ago. And then he saw the article, reached out to his friend that coached the kid and was like, is that the same kid? And I guess he used to be chubby. And he slimmed down, and he's just like transformed into a, NBA prospect within the last couple of years. But a guy that I know is like a well-respected talent evaluator saw him play a few years in high school and didn't realize it was the same kid until I posted the article. But no, I think he's intriguing. What's interesting is that on one hand, he can handle the ball, but then on the other hand, you're like, the handle's a little bit loose. And you kind of touched on that, but elaborate a little bit more about his handle.
I think he's not very a creative scorer in any way. I think his role is going to be more as a closeout attacker, not someone who's going to make plays off the dribble. But he's very, I compare him a bit to Ace Bailey because he's very loose with, you can easily strip the ball away from him. But at this level, he's way too strong. It doesn't really matter. He can put his chest into and create advantages anyway. And as you said, he likes to get to the rim, and that's where he does most of his damage. And at the higher level at Santa Clara, some of these plays he's not good enough with his handles to create advantages, so he's immediately going to play physical. And I think here that's his advantage because he can use both. And most prospects have either one. And he uses his physicality in a way with mastering his body despite changing it so much in the last few years. You touched on him losing weight. Is he gets downhill. It doesn't matter which level he plays. I think that's what your biggest thing what you're buying with him. And if the handle improves, then he can be more of a creative scorer in the NBA, get more opportunities to score. But as of now, I don't really think that's his game, but that's the potential you're buying with him.
Yep. All right. When we return, we're going to talk about Finley Bizjack, one of the best names in college basketball. And Ersin thinks that he is a sleeper NBA prospect. But before we get into the second segment, let's talk about Robin Hood. Because with Robin Hood Gold, you do not need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robin Hood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, a resourceful individual with Robin Hood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25 APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account and contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhoodgold.com. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Of course, investing involves risk. Rates may change, and gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. All right, second segment. Let's talk about Finley Bizjack, a point guard from Butler. I'm familiar with the name because I live in Dallas. He's from the Dallas area, so I remember hearing a lot about him as he played in the high school and prep ranks. Why do you think he is an NBA prospect? I'm not sold, so you're going to have to convince me on this one.
That's mostly his role. I think what you look at him is 6'4". He's a very strong upper body. He's built like a rock, actually. And the way that he's playing at Butler, I think that's the way that he's going to play in the NBA. What I like about him is, all the fundamentals. He plays the right way. He's strong. He can defend in the pick and roll. He can defend in the point of attack. He's more so the defensive first type of guy that you want to place next to a usage-heavy guard, just like, Darius Garland or John Morant. These types of guys to complement them. And what he brings to the NBA, what's the differentiator with him? I think he has an incredible feel for the game, and his court vision is at a top-notch level. He's not really being used as a playmaker, but more as a connective piece, and that's the role that he's going to have as a passer, executing his reads, playing the right way, getting downhill. That's another thing. He's a good athlete despite being a white guy. When you're white and being a good athlete, you're not really getting the love for it. But in his case, he's a very good athlete, and that's the way that he can differentiate himself at Butler this year. He's going to have a bigger role than last year. I think he's going to produce as a double-digit scorer, maybe 12 to 13 a game, and then he has to show that he can bring something extra as a creative scorer. For example, by attacking closeouts or to be creative in the pick and roll. He has a limited role. He has a role, but he stays within his boundaries, but he has to test his boundaries a little bit more. I think you're buying the strength, you're buying the defense, and playing in the right way, man. That's what you're buying with him, Finley Bizjack.
Yeah, I got concerns about the shooting, though. I as a 6'4" guard, good athlete, not an elite athlete, good decision maker, stuffs the stat sheet with rebounds and assists. But we're talking about a guy that is 20%, 27% from three. Any concerns about the shooting?
Well, yeah, it's actually yes and no. The yes is he have to improve the numbers because if he can have a bigger role at Butler, he has to show that he can shoot with the right numbers. But if I look at his process, he has to correct his feet a little bit. I think he's not consistent in the way of preparing for his shot. Everything else is consistent, but the way that he's preparing his shot, he's more so playing in those days not really in control. But if he can control his footwork a little bit more, just like when he's defending without the ball in his hands, he's going to improve as a shooter. And yeah, 27% is not good, but it's a sample size of him, fitting into his role at Butler, playing in a limited role. Sample size is one thing, but in my opinion, he has the tools. And if he can work on his footwork, especially this year, I think the numbers will improve, no doubt.
Yeah, just that's what my biggest concern with him, because like you look at the numbers last year, only 2 attempts per game, 27% from three. This year he's upped the volume to 3.3 a game in 3 games, but he's still at 20%. So just overall the numbers, he is 26% from three on 84 attempts per game, and he's yet to shoot 40% from the floor. So I have real concerns about the efficiency. And if you're not going to be efficient as a guard who's best with the ball in his hands, I think you have to be elite and have an elite skill. And that's why I'm a little bit concerned about him as an NBA prospect. All right, let's switch to Michael Ajayi, who is now at Gonzaga. You've been high on him. I've seen you write about him quite a bit. What are your thoughts on him, and why is he an NBA prospect in your opinion?
I think with him, you're buying the quick twitch athleticism, man, with the physical tools. I think he's one of the best athletes that I've written about so far in my newsletter. And I think that's where it all ends and where the potential is. That's why I was happy that he went to Gonzaga, because if you look at the defensive end, that's not very good. He's not a good team defender. He doesn't make good decisions as a help defender, overhelps often, misses rotations. And I think going to Coach View's system is going to help him with that. Maybe put some more boundaries to his game, because at Pepperdine it was all about him, and now he can play in within the team. And he also came from a way lower level before, so it's always been about him. So it's more so with him how to master his athleticism. And he's a bit older, so he brings experience to the table, and he has one thing to hang his head upon, because he's going to be very good as a shooter, as an open shooter, both off the dribble in some limited touches, but especially off the catch. And a quick twitch athlete like him always holds the gravity of getting downhill, creating advantages out of these closeout attacks. So that's why I think he's so dangerous for the NBA, because his quickness, athleticism, with his way to play out of closeouts, is going to always collapse the defense, and that puts him on his heels, and that's his gravity that he holds, which he can use to his advantage as a shooter. I think it's more so buying offense with him, but he has to learn how to be a better team defender, because that's what the area that he's lacking right now.
Are you at all disappointed in his play so far at Gonzaga? He's yet to score double figures. He's averaging like 6 points per game. Now he is rebounding. The rebounding has translated because he was a good rebounder at Pepperdine last year. He averaged like 10 rebounds per game. I get the size and athleticism, 6'7", around 230, has the physical tools that you like to be able to defend all over. But I am a little disappointed in his production at Gonzaga so far. But I mean, the season is early and he's not starting. Were you surprised by that?
Actually, I was, man, because it was all about Nembard and Graham Ike. That team is, consistent. Retention is important from Gonzaga, and he has to fit in. And I think that's his biggest challenge, man, because he's always been the guy, and now he's basically not even a starter for them. So I think it's more of a mental challenge to overcome that. It's early in the season, and they play some big time competition. And he has been in the WCC with Pepperdine, so it's all new adjustment for him. That's a part of the context, but of course I'm disappointed. I was expecting him to be a double-digit scorer, even if it was him coming off the bench, because he has, in my opinion, has had the opportunities to put up some numbers, but he's maybe in a phase of sacrificing for the team and finding a good balance. How much do I want to sacrifice, and how much can I sacrifice, while still being the same type of player that I am?
Yeah, I mean, he was good against Baylor. I mean, that was a blowout win, and he was 4 or 5 from the floor at 9 points, 8 rebounds. Then he had 9 points and 12 rebounds against Arizona State. So I don't want to make it seem like he just hasn't been productive. He's contributing in other ways, but again, he's yet to reach double figures, and he's shooting just 40% from the floor. And I'm actually surprised that the three ball isn't falling, because last year at Pepperdine, on a low volume of attempts, he was an efficient shooter from deep. And this year, of course, you wanted to see the volume increase. It's about the same, but it's literally cut in half and more. He's only shooting 21% from three, but it is 5 games in, and he's only playing 21 minutes per game, which is down from about 35 that he played last year. All right, when we return, we're going to wrap this episode up with two prospects that I really like, and I think that they will be drafted. They're underrated now, but I don't think they'll be underrated for too long. But before we get into the last segment, covering a couple big men playing in Europe, let's talk about FanDuel, because with FanDuel, you can tackle the NFL action with America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, and it is all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more. And it is on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet, and that's at FanDuel.com. All right, last segment. Let's wrap it up with a couple big men playing across the pond, your neck of the woods, because you are in Amsterdam, correct?
Yeah, correct.
What time is it there? Like, it's got to be
About
close.
5:30, close to 5:30.
Okay, so it's
Yeah.
10:23 a.m. here. All right, let's talk about Johann Grunloh. Now, I just got put on to him a few days ago. And again, I was at a Mavs game. And when I go to the Mavs games, I like to talk to like the different agents and scouts. And someone had mentioned to me, had I seen this kid play? And I said, I've heard the name. He's on my list of guys to watch. And I got a long list of guys to watch, especially with some of the mid-major guys kind of emerging as potential prospects. And so I was like, all right, that's the second time I've heard the name. Watch this film. Now he popped out to me. He stood out to me as far as a player that has a defined NBA role and defined skill set, good size at 6'11", playing in Germany. In my opinion, he has a defined role as a pick and pop big. He can space the floor, but he's also, I mean, he's not like a crazy, quick, twitchy athlete, but he's a good enough athlete that he can be a lob threat out of pick and roll. But I think he's an inside-outside threat. Still young, only 19 years old, good touch around the rim. I like him. I like him a lot. I think he's draftable. Share your thoughts on Grunloh.
I saw him for the first time, I think, a year ago. He was actually the first guy that I wrote about for this cycle. And with Johann Grunloh, he's at the best in context for him available. I think Rasta Vechta, his team is playing in the German highest league. They're playing a European competition. So he has a great sample size to solidify his role. And just like you said, man, I think he's coming to the NBA at the right time. Because if I look at this game, he's more so built to make 4 outs, for example, succeed. Because he can be that guy in the interior that does everything. If you put an entry press, he has very good court vision, very good eyes. I think he's a much underrated passer. I think he's going to be more of a passer in the NBA. I think he's one of the best screening big men in this class, by no doubt. And he is aggressive. I think he's aggressive with him diving to the rim after a screen. And he doesn't get really bothered by, if he doesn't get the ball, he's going to play harder the next time. I think he's more so one of those elite team players. And individually, you don't have to expect something extra from him because just let his role is already defined. And I think in the NBA, with NBA spacing, he's going to be a very good three-point shooter, man. Just like he has a high floor, but he doesn't have a high ceiling. I think his potential is really capped, but he's built for today's NBA, man. And I like him a lot. I think he can be a potential first rounder this summer.
So in your opinion, why does Michael Ruzic get more love than Grunloh?
I think with the ball skills, man, because Grunloh is close to 7 foot. But I think of this of the ball skill, that's the differentiator. Because with Ruzic, that's what you're betting that he's going to develop. Because as a 4, he has to have that. He has to be able to play with the ball in his hands a little bit. And with Grunloh, he doesn't have to do that. So these archetypes are less valuable because 5s are, they're always replaceable. With guys like Ruzic, with that shooting gravity, with that shooting touch, if you can add some more roles to that, I think that's a tough thing to find in the NBA for a man like Ruzic. And with Grunloh, he's going to be a long-term 5. I think he has to be a 5 in the interior. So he doesn't have to, outside of playing in a pick and pop scheme, he doesn't have to be in the perimeter.
All right, quick question. You're a Knicks fan. I'll say the Knicks, I don't even know if they have a pick. I'm just going off the top of my head. The Knicks have a pick in the first. They need a big. You going with Grunloh or would you go with a guy like Maxime Renault?
I'm going with Grunloh, man, because if you look at the Knicks today, they struggle with the center position, man. I think Mitchell Robinson, if he's healthy this year, which I hope so, he's going to solve a lot. But they don't have that perimeter guy. Now we have Karl Anthony Towns, but someone has to back him up, even if you want to play in a different way in playoff time. for example, the Knicks, they want to be less predictable with Towns. You want to make it easier for the opponent to take him away. That's the type of guy that you're taking. I think with Maxime Renault is, yeah, I think he's similar player, maybe a better player today than Johann Grunloh, if I'm being totally honest about that. But he is more so you have to feed him more. I think Johan Grunloh can impact the game without shooting, with his passing, with his gravity that he holds down, in the block. I think that one thing that I like about him, I'm wondering what you think about it when you watch him play. I think his two-handed finishing and footwork and how easily he moves, man. That's a differentiator that to maybe even use him as a scorer in the NBA. Not a lot of inside scorers as full-time fives anymore, but he has a lot of weapons. But he's being more so put in a box, and I think the box that he's put in is exactly the role that's going to play in the NBA. He has a lot of potential in terms of an interior scorer instead of that pick and roll, pick and pop three, which should be his role at the NBA, to be honest. And that's why I think he has first round value. Because for me, first round value is investing in his future. I think a team can invest in his future and change his role down stretch in his career.
All right. Lastly, let's talk about French prospect Joan Beringer. I've seen him play live. I think he's definitely under the radar. Just fits the role of what a lot of teams are looking for in a modern, low usage, athletic big that is a play finisher. I saw him at Adidas Next Generation in Dubai. Didn't put up strong numbers, but his game is so, I guess, dependent on a playmaker getting him the ball. Now, he is going to be able to score off activity and so on, but a good playmaker that gets him the ball, I think his game will really shine. What are your thoughts on him? And I think he just signed like a contract extension, right? And
yeah,
is that
he's playing
correct?
for the Cedevita Olympia in Croatia. And
Yeah.
I like him for 2026, actually, because I don't really see a defined NBA role with him. I think it's because he doesn't have, outside of athleticism, much to offer as of now that he's going to be put in the box as a rim runner. But he has some areas to work on. I think his free throw percentage is not good. He's shooting close to 50, 55%. That's not a good number, sustainable to play good minutes in the NBA. But what you buy with him is the athletic pop, man. The athletic specimen. He's a very good screener and hard roller. I think if you have a good playmaker in place, for example, the Knicks with Tyler Kolek, he's the type of guy that will thrive with a playmaker like him next to him. But he is more so being used I think, as a second or third string center, which you have to change a game, to change the dynamic of your game. Because if your NBA teams are being schemed away by the opponent and they have to improvise, he's the type of guy that can, I think, in my potential, has a potential as a passer from the interior, more of an in and out game,
Mm-hmm.
and more so to use his ability to involve as a screener and as a finisher inside. But he has to be stronger, man. I think that's the biggest challenge with him because he's very slim. You can
Yeah.
see the athletic pops, but he's not really built to play against physical five men in the NBA. I think
Yeah.
that's the thing that's holding him back a little bit. Because if he was stronger, I think he would be one of the best centers in the NBA league, which would put him at a high level eventually. But his physical development, that's what's going to take time, and that's why I think he's more so of a guy for 2026 rather than this year.
Yeah. I mean, he's 2006 born. I mean, he just had a birthday like earlier this week. So he's young. I mean, I could see a team saying with his athleticism and so on, then I'll draft him second round, develop him. But if it's a team that has a good playmaker, and I know there's not a lot of them, and like I look at a team like the Clippers right now, who I think are exceeding expectations. They're above 500. James Harden is best when he has an athletic finisher, a lob threat. Now Zubac is playing really well, but I thought that was one of the issues that the Clippers had last year is that they weren't athletic. They did bring in Mo Bamba. I think he just played. Kai Jones brings some athleticism. Then I look at Phoenix last year. They weren't athletic. They didn't have an athletic big. And then you look at teams like Dallas, where they got two, and it changed their season last year when they gave Luka Doncic 48 minutes of vertical lob threats. I look at a guy like Trae Young, who becomes even more dangerous when if you pair him with 48 minutes of vertical lob threats because his floater looks exactly like his lob pass. And so those are two unique playmakers or three unique playmakers in a sense. But if I'm a team and I have that type of playmaker, again, there's not many. A guy like Beringer or Beringer is the type of player that I'm always going to have on my roster to pair with my playmaker and lob threat, especially if they're shooting in the corner. So I would take a risk on him in 2025. I mean, you probably won't get a first round grade for him if you're looking at it from his perspective. You'll probably be a second round pick, and that kind of makes it, a little bit more challenging. But I get what you're saying. 2026, give him another year to get stronger because he is a late 2006 born. I mean, honestly, if he were born 40 days later, he wouldn't even be eligible for the 2025 draft. So it may make more sense for him to enter 2026. And I just saw that he signed a long, I think it's like a 3-year contract. And I guess for the team, it's like, all right, if he's drafted high, we can get a bigger buyout.
Bring us some money.
It's exactly. the whole business aspect of basketball in Europe. So I want to ask you this real fast. If he develops like a jumper, or whether it's from the elbows or the short corner, not necessarily saying he needs to space the floor, but we'll talk about, let's say he is in 2026 draft, comes back next year, shows more range. How high do you think he can go?
I think if you add a jumper to his game, I think that's going to change the whole dynamic, because a freak athlete like him in the role as a screener with the ability to jump and pop to the perimeter, I think he can play all around the floor. I think that really changed the game. But again, he has to be stronger, so I wouldn't really take him this year anyway. Yeah. But if he gets stronger and develops the jumper, he's going to be first round the next year, no doubt.
Well, from a team side, if you take him, if he's in the draft this year, he stays in the draft, you take him and you develop him, you're going to look like a genius down the line. And you get him a lot cheaper with lower expectations. Or even if he's like a late first. Like I used to love how the Rockets would do, like Clint Capella. They drafted him, stashed him in the G League for a whole year, developed him. They brought him up at the end of his rookie season, and then now Capella has been a starting level center ever since. Even if you look at Gobert, in a sense, spent a lot of his early year with the Bakersfield Jam, developed, got better, learned the nuances of the game, starting center ever since. I mean, those are two outlier stories in a sense, but I do think that for a team, if you can get him out this year, develop him in the G League, because he has a simplified role. He has a role that is pretty simple, and you can probably get him. You get more bang for your buck. But I do think that if he stays in 2026 and shows that he added to his game, it's better for him because his draft stock could skyrocket. But anyway. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast. Once again, thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Check out Ersin's newsletter. Matter of fact, I'll let you plug it. Plug your newsletter.
Thanks, Raf. That's Demir NBA, so EDEMIR NBA.substack.com. Well, I have a lot of people unsubscribing because they get too much notifications. So if you're not bothered by that, because I'm writing about every 2 or 3 days a new scouting report, I combine my watching with the clipping, and then I continue to write. And if you like to be updated about the less coveted prospect, this newsletter is the place to be, man. But if you're looking for the top guys, then I'm not going to be much of a resource for you. So that's the nuance that I want to add.
Yeah, it's all about having a defined role, and your defined role is finding the under-radar guys, because you were very, very high on Jalen Wells, and I'd say some NBA teams should have listened to you, because Jalen Wells is providing lottery pick value early on in his career. Well, once again, thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Be sure to check out the Locked On newsletter. Go to LockedOnDaily.com, because your favorite Locked On NBA podcast has a newsletter, and it will be delivered right to your inbox every morning. Once again, it's Rafael Barlowe with my guy, Ersin Demir, who is reporting live from Amsterdam, and we are out of here.